Hello and welcome to another episode of the Q&R Code podcast, where today Riley and I are in person together. I'm Quinn, by the way. And first things first, we wanted to bring up, you might have seen a change to the Q&R Code. Did you notice our new cover? We thought that would be exciting to surprise you guys with, so hopefully you love it and are excited. Riley and I feel so excited about having a refresh and just, we always knew, even though we had a lot of fun creating the first cover, we knew it was a cover that was kind of just like, we need to get something out there. Let's get this moving. We don't want to just be speaking about the podcast and never making it happen. And clearly the budget at that point was $0. So we made do with what we had, and now we have a cover that resonates with us more and just feels like it represents the Q&R code well. So hopefully you love it.
We love it. It was such a fun shoot also to do, to get the imagery for it. So I feel like it just has that good energy in it. And the previous cover was just a existing photo that we had. So getting to create something with the intentionality of it being for the podcast was really fun, and thinking about like the colors and just what we wanted it to feel like. And I'm so happy with how it turned out. Round of applause for Quinn, our in-house graphic designer. She is a multifaceted woman, horse girl, tattoo artist, baker, graphic designer. The list is endless, but yeah, we're so excited about it coming out. And now we're excited because we have more images from that shoot that we can use for other material that we're still excited to share with you. So that will be more on our socials. And I think that's that on that, probably.
Well, Riley, my mom, and I have just been having a ball together because we are together in Riley's home in Virginia, getting to have some girl time, which, as you know, is that's where our heart beats. Our heart really beats for each other and feels full when we are all together. And it has been just a lovely start of the spring. We just had daylight savings a couple of days ago, so curious how you guys are feeling. Riley and I did lose some sleep for sure. We felt that in our sleep. We both woke up and were like, okay, our backs are aching and we have circles under our eyes, and we're kind of like, hello? Well, good morning. This is what it is. But I'm glad because maybe I'm confused, but I'm pretty sure that this is the time that now I feel like it's correct and it should be this way, because now, or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I actually like daylight savings time. I'm not sure. Maybe I don't, but because now we get to have more light in the evening, which I like, but also it does mean it stays darker in the morning, which I also like the light morning. Here's what I want: more lightness. So I don't know exactly how to make that happen. I don't know who to ask about this, but what I like is for it to be bright from the moment I wake up to an hour before I'm going to bed.
I think that you might have to move somewhere equatorial, is what it's sounding like, and or do part of the year like further north, part of the year further south. But I don't remember right now if this is the time where it's like technically on or off. Doesn't really matter since we all just made up the times anyway. I just think one way or another, let's stick to one of them and not do the switching, because I don't think it's good for anybody. It's confusing. It throws off the circadian rhythm. There are some places that use it and some places that don't, even within one country. I'm like, okay, this is madness. We don't need it. Like you said, it's nice having it light later into the evenings, but I don't like it being darker early in the mornings because I rise with the sun, and when I have to get up before it, then I just feel more groggy and sleepy and all those things. So I'm definitely in the camp of advocates for let's stick to one timing. I don't like this change. I don't think it's helpful. It's nice that it's light later, but at the same time, we're already on that train headed towards the summer solstice where the days are getting longer anyway.
Well, we have been enjoying the springtime coming and we feel it. I always love, right now, while Riley is on more of the East Coast, I enjoy coming to Riley's at the beginning of spring because there are more things in bloom. It just gives more of, you know what? I'm lucky in Denver too. I love being in Denver. I still, being in the West, associate myself so much with my time in Wyoming, where my time, literally my whole life until I moved to Denver, where it was not giving blossoming early spring. It was very, very late spring slash early summer where things started to feel like they were really waking up for the warmer months. So I'm lucky in Denver, but I love it here because they have such beautiful blossoming trees that will start earlier and just gives a great spring vibe, as well as farmers market that we were able to go to on Saturday. That's so fun to me, and we picked out the most fun seeds and other stuff for Riley's garden to get that going. And my mom is the Martha Stewart of our life, and she is here helping, all hands on deck, being like, this makes sense to go with this, and let's make sure we have these soils for you. And we got Riley a couple of hanging baskets for her covered porch, which I just think is the cutest, fun vibe. So we have definitely been leaning into, okay, spring is coming, and let's make it happen for ourselves, because if you guys are into gardening at all, you would know that you have to be planning ahead. Unfortunately, if you start planning once spring has already arrived, you're a bit behind the boat, and there are more limited options for you to be able to sow certain seeds and yeah, have certain starts prepared for your garden.
Honestly, even right now, early March or getting to mid March, we're a little behind the ball based off of when our last frost generally is in Charlottesville. So we've been like thinking about our garden a lot, but now it's like we need to really get things going. So we're going to put a bunch of seeds into Jiffy pots, which are like little seed start pots, and some into the ground, just depending what it is. But I'm so excited because you guys know with my garden last year, I've felt so rewarded by the yield that we got, but we definitely also were learning a lot because it was our first garden since we lived here and just needed to do trial and error. That's how I think we learn most things, but particularly with plants, you just can't know exactly how they're going to behave because even somebody that has a garden a couple yards over, if they get different sunlight or have different shade or have different soil, whatever it is, there are a lot of factors going into it. So I just hope that enough of my stuff turns out that we get a good yield. You can't count on everything, but I'm so excited. And like Quinn said, these seeds that we got are seriously the cutest seed packets I've ever seen. I think the brand is Hudson Valley Seeds or Hudson Seeds. Honestly, can't remember exactly, but each one has artwork on it from a different artist and has information not only about the plant and planting on the inside of the packet, but the artist. And I think that's so cute. You know we love art. Speaking of, we had such a fun start of our little spring weekend girls trip. A bit of a staycation, but outside of our town, still in Virginia. And we went to this cabin, I was about to say, but it's a lodge. The lodge where they filmed Dirty Dancing, and I had never seen that film, which is crazy. As you guys know, we watch a lot of movies, so we watched it first together so we would get a vibe of the location where we were going to go stay. Such a fun movie, of course. I endorse. So cute. Love dancing, love romance. it checked all my boxes. And that was just such a sweet little place. It's higher in the mountains, so it was a little chillier, giving very, very chilly spring. But we got to go to an art exhibit that was so inspiring to us. Particularly, I feel like Quinn's heart was going pitter patter. I loved it as well, but since she's so in a mode of drawing and designing with her career, that I want to let you talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's always so special getting to see work from different artists, and I think in general, going to a museum and going to art shows just will never get old for me. Of course, there are ones that are more inspiring than others, and I can think of some in my life that I've seen that it's like, oh, that was cool, but 99% of the time, if I ever go to a museum, I, as a working artist, am. Bless you, Riley. As a working artist, I feel so inspired by it because there is so much to take away from, like, just so many takeaways from other artists. And to me, if you have been following me on Instagram, you are catching my vibe that so much of what I'm trying to portray and post is about living artfully and just the life of a creative in general. So I don't think you have to be a practicing artist at all to apply or feel inspired by spending time looking at art. But I think for me, there are so many ways that it feels applicable because I'm being inspired by, of course, shape and form and texture and color and scale, and also the ideas behind the artwork and art movements. I think it's so cool. I mean, Riley, being an art history major, is clearly inspired by that too, because art history really just dives into the meanings behind art movements in so many ways. So this was an Art Nouveau exhibit specifically focusing on Alphonse Mucha, which is a Czech artist who basically had his whole career in Paris, but you would recognize him if you guys look him up or look up Art Nouveau. It's lots of flowy floral lines, lots of beautiful tall women and their hair flowing and flowy dresses, and just a lot of focusing on feminine form and florals. So that it was so fun, and I think such a good one for springtime because it felt so much like just looking at a bunch of these opening blossoms. And I like to peek in and look at the details. Riley and I did get scolded because I think it's ridiculous. The art was behind glass, what we were looking at, and we were both very clearly not reaching to touch it, but there are details that you need to lean in to see because, especially as an artist, that's where I'm like, I am eating up. I need to see in the details. I love to step back, and that is such an important part of viewing artwork. But I also want to get in close because I think something that Mucha did so well was make stunning prints and graphics, but that when you lean in, there were so many little texture marks and added, I think it was a lot of pencil, like graphite details in the florals that I, as a tattoo artist specifically, who is interested in fine line florals, I want to be inspired by that type of mark making. So Riley and I, they told us, back up, you need to be at an arm's distance. And I'm like, okay, I'm not 2 years old anymore with the eyes of a newborn. I need to look a little closer. But anyway, it was so beautiful. I loved looking at the colors. I love looking at the female form in artwork. That's honestly always been in artwork and in real life. That's always been something that inspires me in art so much, and seeing Flora with the female figure, I just think is so so stunning, so striking, and I could soak it up with my eyes all day.
As could I, and like Quinn said, a lot of the work were prints, and so he made an original and then produced prints, which something that I thought was very cool learning about at the exhibit was how Art Nouveau came at a time in history where the technology had gotten to a point where they could have a lot more accurate color reproduction as well as like scale of production for creating prints. And I don't know if it was Paris specifically or France had just changed laws about public advertising. And so a lot of the work that he did were posters and advertisements for especially like plays and shows, art shows, things like that. And because they were allowed to be posted around the city, it was the first time that a lot of people that otherwise would have had art be inaccessible to them because they weren't wealthy, that they could own art. And they were having a big problem with people stealing the posters so they could put it up in their home and have a piece of fine art when they wouldn't have been able to have it before. And it's things like that that make me think people that think that they're not into art or that that's not going to a museum isn't really for them. I just encourage everyone to try it out because you learn these details that aren't specifically just about art technique. If you feel I'm not an artist, I'm not that like interested in that, I think that there's so much to be gained from the curation of these exhibits that curators make it interesting. Like that's really their job, and there are certain places that are going to be more like just about the looking at the art and they don't have as much blurbs and information, and that can sometimes feel more daunting to people. That's just my little pitch. It's very interesting and it's a very thought-provoking to consider that the way we all like have posters since we were a kid. You might have a poster of the Jonas Brothers that you got out of a magazine, or I have so many posters that are like vintage that you either get super cheap at a vintage store that I'm like, I don't even know what this is from, or was from my grandma's house or something like that, and they feel so accessible. And to think about that it was not that long ago that wasn't even a concept, and a lot of people wouldn't have had any art to put in their homes. I just thought was that part was really cool. So much of it was interesting, but look up Alphonse Mucha or Art Nouveau to see some of what we're talking about, and can zoom in on your computer, really look at the details so nobody tells you to step back. Also, in our defense, some of the work was like baseball card size. Some was bigger, but it's so detailed and intricate and so tiny. I'm like, arm's length. Please, do you see I'm visually impaired? I need a magnifying glass as it is to operate in daily life. We are very conscientious people about art. We are not touching, and this is also a print behind glass. It'll be okay, but anyway, it's funny always to get reprimanded at a museum, and I'm like, okay, I respect art and artists. I'm sorry. But that was really cool. That was in Roanoke, if anyone is in the Virginia area and is thinking, I would like to see that. The other thing that I feel like is diverging in the woods now, but just hit me that I'm like, we were so excited about spring and springtime and catching up that we didn't even do Entertainment Corner, but does bear mentioning is the finale of Traitors.
Yes, and on that same boat, we also watched the Oscars this year, which is not something that we do. At least I don't do it often. I don't think you do either, right? But Traitors was good. I feel like we shouldn't. I don't know who listens that watches the Traitors, but that was fun, and I was excited by what happened. Honestly, pretty much what I would have wanted to happen. And I think because who ended up being the winners in the end, it made sense. I guess I will say, I guess I am going to give it away. So skip forward a minute if you don't want to hear this. But because all faithfuls and non-gamers, quote unquote, because they like call themselves gamers, were the ones who won, I think that is the only reason why 4 stayed standing, because I think if it had been gamers who would have won, they definitely would have voted that they wanted to banish someone else for sure.
I agree with that assessment, and I also thought it was very satisfying that they like picked off the last 2 traitors and ended up all being loyals and just like trusting that they were loyals, faithfuls, same thing. However, the other alternative ending that I would have been curious about, not that I want this because I'm so happy for Dylan that he was faithful and he got as far as he did, and I agree with, I think it was Brittany's sentiment that she was like, if Danielle was smart, she wouldn't have kept him around that long. That's probably true, but it would have been very good gameplay if Brittany was able that last episode to rally everyone to banish Dylan and see how that happened. I'm just curious about how that would have played out. Not that I wanted that. I liked the satisfaction of how it ended, but she, I think, did such a good job as a traitor, and it would have been very, very compelling if they voted him off. He doesn't get to reveal at that point whether he is or isn't, and to see what would have happened around the fire pit at that point. I think that because there's so much suspicion on Brittany, they probably would have voted her out anyway. Who knows? But I just wonder if a traitor ever could make it. It gets so suspicious that that part of the game where the traitor takes it all ends up like orchestrating a lot of what happens, but I think is a pretty unlikely outcome. Who knows? The other last thing that I'll say about it is I really liked the reunion. Sometimes reunions aren't worth watching, and I often skip them if I'm being quite honest, because I don't know. It just a lot of the times is not the same as the thrill of watching something to me. But this was a super funny reunion. There was some drama, but it also just probably cracked me up because Bob the drag queen was there, and she is such a personality that I would enjoy any TV with her, I'm sure, and the kind of back and forth between her and another character that was saying, we're like afraid of my spotlight, and I think Bob was right when she said, I don't need to steal anyone else's spotlight. I am going to get camera time, and that is not a concern of mine.
I totally agree, and also to me, those are worth it even just to see the fashion, because I love like those. I think that Traitors is a great show where for me, like, hey, the Love Island girlies sometimes really bring it, and I will give credit where credit is due. But for me, it's so fun to see a show like Traitors where that is a little bit more of flamboyant dress that I think is so fun. Bob, the drag queen, obviously killed it, and so did everyone. They looked nice. I do think Boston Rob was wearing a nice suit, but it cracked me up when he stood up and was like, yeah, what do you think about this? And I'm like, yes, you did look spiffy. You do look nice. Thank goodness you didn't have the audacity to be wearing a backwards baseball cap, because I would have thrown a fit. But that's just such a fun part of it to me. And I think that Andy Cohen, who I have not seen do any, I haven't watched him on anything because I don't watch Bravo until just now started. So I thought that Andy Cohen is a really good host for a reunion.
Andy Cohen is a good host for reunions, and I'm sure he thought that that was child's play compared to doing the Housewives. The Housewives reunions are sometimes literally so impossible to have someone speak, and it's like, oh my gosh, like he has to really corral the situation sometimes. But I just wanted to ask you, because you saw season 2, if they even had a reunion.
Yes, they had a reunion, which is the first time I saw him. Wait, I'm thinking. Was it because I saw the Salt Lake City reunion? Now I'm forgetting, because I now am thinking once again of the season 3 players, and I'm like trying to remember who even was on season 2. Oh, yes, no, there was a reunion. There was a reunion. There was some shade. Oh, yeah, because can I tell you what happened, or do you not want to know? Okay, so the reason that I suspected what I suspected is because at the end of season 2, it was left to 3 people. There were 2 gamers, and that they were actually close friends that had a relationship, not besties, but like for that universe, they were close. And there was one clearly that they knew, like, she's a faithful and she was also not a gamer. I think she was part of the reality or Housewives franchise, and they ended up both voting to have a banishment and voted her off and just split the money together, being the gamers. And she was pissed at the reunion because she's like, I know you knew I was a faithful. You 100% knew I was a faithful. You voted me off because you knew you had an alliance together to make all the money. And they were like, okay, you're still so hurt about this. That's kind of crazy to us, because for us looking at this situation as gamers, like, we don't expect loyalty from anyone, whereas she sees it as an actual moral thing that she's like, you clearly knew I was a faithful, and they're like, yeah, but we were playing the game. So
I just wonder how I would act in that situation, because it's one thing to say, like, you knew I was a faithful, but it's like, but what if you weren't? Maybe they did know, maybe it was one of those situations where it was so obvious, but at the same time, that's why it's kind of crazy that this season ended the way it did, because that is a lot of trust, because everyone's gonna be like, you know, I'm a faithful, come on, like, it's been so obvious this whole time, and it's like, yeah, but the point is that it would be hard to detect if you were a traitor. Anyway, moving on from traitors.
Okay, now quickly what I wanted to say about the Oscars. First of all, another night filled with so much glam and fashion that I think is so fun, and I do love picturing getting to wear the different outfits, and I just think it's so fun that people get to step up and have fun with their dress. Yes, I get it, it's celebrities, and I know that for so many people it's like, yeah, it's just celebrities getting to wear expensive things, but to me, a lot of these people are not celebrities that are nepo babies that were born into it. Like, a lot of these actors and a lot of the people that are being celebrated aren't even the actors, too. They're people behind the scenes that are either producing the movie or the music or whatever. I think it's really fun and a special way to celebrate. I'm also glad that they acknowledged obviously the LA wildfires. If they hadn't, that would have been crazy. If you guys remember, we talked about watching Anora won for the best movie, whatever fancy thing they call it, best picture. And I believe this is who, when this acceptance speech came up, I think it was Sean Baker who produced Anora. I'm not sure about that, but I think that's who it was. And I really liked their acceptance speech because they talked about watching movies in the theater. And I always, being such a little advocate for what I believe in, I always appreciate when someone uses their acceptance speech to talk about what they feel like is important going on in the world. Multiple people brought up Palestine, which I thought was really important, and multiple people just brought up acceptance. I know that there was some controversy around that people with Emilia Perez. I didn't see that movie and hadn't heard of it, but people were disappointed that trans people were not brought up in any of the acceptance speeches, because apparently that has something to do with the movie. So I appreciate the people who did bring up some issues that they wanted to talk about. This one, the acceptance speech was about movie theaters and watching movies out and about rather than just through streaming services. And I felt internally rewarded because Riley and I you've heard us multiple times kind of justify ourselves watching as many movies as we have been, because we equate and are working on dropping these or letting go of these feelings of equating our worth with productivity. And also, we are changing our mind about what is productive, and that watching films for us oftentimes actually is a productive use of our time. But I know I had at times felt a little bit insecure bringing up to the podcast how often we're watching movies, because I will hear some hardworking people be like, oh, I don't have time for that. Like, I'm never watching a movie. That's not something I have time for. But Riley and I have clearly been prioritizing that in the theater, especially because, as you know, we purchased a pass that we're able to see unlimited movies at the theater during the month. And I knew that I felt on the right page because of consuming that cinema and that art, and just that it's a fun thing I love to do. But this speech also reminded me that I am doing it for a cause, because it is so important to be able to see and support movies in the theater, because since COVID, I think they said 1,000 something movie theaters have closed down, and more are closing down all of the time because people are not frequenting the movie theater. And he made the point that he thinks it's important to have movies in the theater where people can have a community experience, that they're sharing in emotions together. It also reminded me to not be a Scrooge like I was a couple episodes ago, talking about people being loud and laughing, which I knew in that moment I was being a Scrooge, but he said it is one of the few places in the world that we come together to either share in laughter or share in crying or share in just serious thought-provoking moments, and that kids should be able to experience that, and people should continue coming together, sharing in a community space, that they're connecting with others and with art and with cinema in a way that feels, yeah, more community based than just being at home watching through streaming platforms that also, without the support of the movie theaters, less movies can be made. And there are plenty of people in that industry that don't have the money to produce important things. And that was part of his point too, was saying, this might be a little paraphrased, but my takeaway was basically, for advocating for what you believe in and making stories to share about important things, we need the funding, because a lot of production companies that would support matters that they think are important storylines, some production companies with more money aren't going to support those ideas, and some of the smaller production companies that don't have the funds need us to be watching and paying for tickets.
Such a good point, and I thought that there were multiple things that were brought up that were thought-provoking during the Oscars. To round out our episode, tying it back into spring, I just wanted to share with you guys a little sneak peek of one of my Martha recipes coming up, because it was so hitting the spot for a little springtime dessert, and it's a buttermilk sorbet. And my twin and mom and I were like, don't sorbets not have dairy in them? But apparently it's just because of like the water ratio. Like, you don't add any water, I don't think, to ice cream, so it stays nice and creamy, whereas sorbet like this did have water in it. And so it was more like icy than creamy, but it was buttermilk and lemon, and so delicious. I got an ice cream maker attachment for my KitchenAid, used that for the first time. I don't know, that wasn't like crazy expensive. It was $70, so it is expensive, but I was like, I'll start making ice cream and that will be a fun thing for me, and that's worth it. A freestanding alone like electric ice cream maker might be a lot more, I'm not sure. So this might not be a recipe that's that accessible to everyone, unfortunately. But if you do have an ice cream maker and that's something you're interested in, it'll be a little bit till that comes out on Instagram, but you can follow along with me there to see that and just loving the reminder that with the change of seasons, there's a change of menu because Quinn and I love to eat seasonally and romanticize every different season. So in the fall, I was like, yes, buttermilk squash, butternut squash soup, all the different squashes, getting into those like cozy, warm seasonings and pumpkin dishes. And now I am ready for like fresh peas, and honestly, spring, you're just like, okay, bring on everything, all the fresh produce. And I'm feeling very excited with my love of gardening and cooking and nature. They just all really get that extra flourish in the spring, where also your seasonal effectiveness, whether it's full on seasonal depression or not, I'm like, I don't mind the winter, and then the sun's coming out and I'm like, okay, I am actually really fluffing my feathers and feeling rejuvenated right now. So it's all very exciting.
We have been enjoying and going big with Riley in the kitchen. Riley always spoils us, and my mom and I have just been sitting back kicking our feet up while Riley is making things happen in the kitchen. So thank you, and we love it. And Riley has made us, just to name a few, a delicious beet soup that I want her to make again. It was to die for. I'm on a beet kick, so that had me going crazy. I loved it so much. Riley made us a delicious cocktail, which, as you know, Riley and I don't frequent drinking, but it was so worth it. And I'm like, again, want that again, please. Thank you. It was called Mary's Knees and had orange juice, lime juice, lemon juice, vodka, and Grand Marnier. And that's the type of cocktail for me, having something so light and just feel fresh. We had another use of the buttermilk by having a buttermilk soup that was so fun. And she made us an amazing salmon. Anyway, it just keeps on giving. We're so grateful. And we are hoping that all of you listeners are having a little bit of that effervescent excitement popping up for you, knowing that spring is right on its way. We are always just hoping that you guys feel as much happiness and lightness as possible, and are curious to hear if there's been anything that has been exciting you or occurring to you for how you're stepping into your spring season. St. Patty's Day is next week, which I'm excited about, and I'm glad Riley and I will be together, if not literally to be in an outfit like mine and wear all green. This is a very fitting outfit for March. But anywho, we are always wishing you guys the best and excited to talk to you next week. Thanks for watching or listening. Remember that we are on YouTube now. This might be a little bit of a quirky video with Riley and I in our together setup. We do the best we can to make it work with the podcast, no matter where Riley and I are, whether we're together or far. So hopefully you enjoyed the ride. Follow us on Instagram at the Q&R code, or Quinn Liliestrom and Riley Liliestrom, and find us on TikTok as well at the Q&R code podcast, and on YouTube we are at the Q&R code. Thank you so much for joining us. Goodbye.